I was standing in the grand foyer of the Ashford estate, covered in dirt and grease stains, my dress torn at the hem, my carefully styled hair now disheveled and falling out of its pins. Every eye in the room was on me. The entire family had gathered in the living room just beyond. I could see them through the wide archway. They were all dressed impeccably for Christmas Eve dinner. Silk dresses, tailored suits, jewelry that cost more than my car. And there I was, 45 minutes late, looking like I'd been wrestling in a ditch. Constance, my mother-in-law, stood near the fireplace in an elegant cream gown. Her expression was a careful mask of concern, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. She'd been waiting 3 years for me to prove I didn't belong in this family. Tonight, I'd handed her the evidence on a silver platter. "Natalie, dear," Constance said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You look unwell. Perhaps it would be best if you went home. You're clearly unprepared for this evening." Theodore, Oliver's older brother, smirked from his position by the bar. His wife Vivian actually wrinkled her nose, like my appearance physically offended her. Even Oliver looked embarrassed. My husband stood near his father, his face flushed, unable to meet my eyes. "We can tell Oliver you weren't feeling well," Constance continued smoothly. "No one would think less of you for leaving. In fact, I think everyone would be more comfortable if—" The doorbell rang, cutting her off. The butler moved to answer it, and I turned, still trying to find words to explain about the woman on the highway, about the broken-down car, about why helping a stranger had seemed more important than arriving on time. The door opened, and the same woman I'd spent 30 minutes helping in the freezing cold walked in. She was transformed. Clean now. Her silver hair perfectly styled. She wore an expensive coat I recognized as designer even with my limited fashion knowledge. She looked elegant, composed, completely at home in these surroundings. Our eyes met, and she gave me a small, warm smile before turning to survey the room. Her gaze landed on Constance. The temperature in the foyer seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Hello, Connie," the woman said, her voice carrying both authority and deep emotion. "It's been a long time." Constance's face went completely white. She grabbed the back of a nearby chair, her knuckles turning white with the force of her grip. "Beatrice," she whispered. The name came out strangled. "That's impossible. You weren't invited. You're not welcome here." Beatrice's expression didn't change. "I know I wasn't invited. You've ignored every letter I've sent for 2 years. Every phone call. Every attempt to reconnect. So I decided to stop asking permission." The room had gone completely silent. Theodore and Vivian exchanged confused glances. Frederick, Oliver's father, had stood up slowly, his face showing shock and something else I couldn't identify. Oliver looked between his mother and this stranger with complete bewilderment. "Someone want to explain what's going on?" Oliver asked. Beatrice's eyes shifted back to me, and her smile returned, genuine and warm. "Before anyone explains anything," she said, "I need to say something. This young woman," she gestured to me, standing there filthy and disheveled, stopped on the highway tonight when my car broke down. It was freezing. It was snowing. She was clearly on her way somewhere important. She paused, looking around the room at all these people in their expensive clothes, in their expensive house, with their expensive judgment. She got her hands dirty fixing my car. Ruined her dress. Made herself late to your gathering. And when I told her I was coming to this address, she insisted on making sure I arrived safely. Despite knowing she'd be judged for her appearance. Despite knowing your family's obvious standards. Constance's face had gone from white to red. "Beatrice, you need to leave. Now. Actually, I'm staying. Because it's Christmas Eve, and I'm your sister, and this young woman showed me more kindness in 30 minutes than this family has shown anyone outside your social circle in decades." The word sister landed like a bomb in the silent room. Oliver's mouth fell open. Theodore looked like he'd been punched. Even Frederick seemed stunned, though there was something in his expression that suggested he'd known about Beatrice's existence. "You have a sister?" Oliver said to his mother. "You never mentioned a sister." Constance's perfect composure was cracking. "She's no sister of mine. Not anymore. Not for 26 years. Beatrice turned to me again. "Thank you for stopping tonight. For helping a stranger. For being kind when you had every reason to keep driving. I still couldn't speak. My mind was trying to process what was happening. The woman I'd helped was Constance's sister? A sister no one had mentioned in 3 years of marriage? I don't understand, I finally managed to say. You will, Beatrice said gently. We all will. But first, I think it's time this family had an honest conversation. One they've been avoiding for more than 2 decades. Constance looked like she wanted to call security. Frederick looked like he wanted to hear what Beatrice had to say. Theodore and Vivian looked uncomfortable. Oliver looked completely lost. And I stood there in my ruined dress, covered in grease and dirt, suddenly at the center of a family drama I didn't understand. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Tonight was going to change everything. Let me take you back to the beginning. To how I ended up in this family. To 3 years ago, when I first learned that the man I loved came from a world that would never truly accept me. 3 years ago, I met Oliver's family for the first time. We'd been dating for 2 years. He'd proposed 6 months earlier, and I'd said yes without hesitation. I loved him. He was kind, dedicated to his work as a surgeon, and he made me laugh even during my worst shifts at the hospital. I knew he came from money. He'd mentioned his family was comfortable and that his father worked in finance. But Oliver lived modestly, drove a normal car, never acted entitled. I thought comfortable meant upper middle class. Maybe a nice house in the suburbs. I had no idea what I was walking into. The engagement dinner was at the Ashford estate. Oliver drove us there on a Sunday evening, and when we turned down a private road lined with old trees, I thought we were lost. This is the way to your parents' house? Yeah, it's just up ahead. Then the mansion appeared. 3 stories of stone and ivy. Columns flanking the entrance. Manicured gardens stretching in every direction. Actual servants waiting at the door. Oliver, what do your parents do exactly? He looked uncomfortable. Dad's in investment banking. Mom's family has old money. I told you they were comfortable. This isn't comfortable. This is a museum. I was wearing my best dress, a navy blue sheath I'd bought on sale at Macy's. I'd thought it was nice. Now, looking at this house, I felt like I was showing up to a gala in pajamas. A butler, an actual butler, opened the door. Oliver greeted him by name. We stepped into a foyer with marble floors and a crystal chandelier that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 years. Constance appeared at the top of the grand staircase. She descended slowly, her hand trailing along the banister. She wore a cream-colored designer dress and pearls that looked like they belonged in a vault. Oliver, darling. She kissed his cheek, then turned to me with an assessing look that made me feel like livestock being evaluated at a fair. You must be Natalie. She extended her hand. I shook it. Her grip was cool and brief. So lovely to finally meet you, she said, though her eyes suggested otherwise. Come in. Let's have drinks before dinner. The living room was intimidating. Antique furniture. Original artwork. Windows that overlooked grounds I couldn't even see the end of. Frederick, Oliver's father, shook my hand warmly. Theodore and his wife Vivian were already there, looking perfectly at home in this environment. We sat for drinks. I perched on the edge of an antique chair, terrified I'd spill something. So, Natalie, Constance began, settling into her seat like a queen on a throne. Oliver tells us you're a nurse. The way she said nurse made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. Yes, I work in the ICU at Memorial Hospital. How practical. She smiled. And your family? What do they do? My father works at the automotive plant. My mother works in a school cafeteria. I watched Constance's expression carefully arrange itself into polite interest. But her eyes went cold. How lovely that you come from such hard-working stock, she said. Stock. Like I was a breed of dog. Dinner was excruciating. 7 courses served by silent staff. Crystal glasses for wines I couldn't identify. Conversations about people and places I'd never heard of. Constance asked pointed questions throughout the meal. And where did you go to university? State school. I got my nursing degree there. How sensible. And you met Oliver at the hospital. Yes. He was doing his surgical residency. I was working night shifts. Yes. Oliver's told us about those difficult early years. She made it sound like he'd survived a war. We offered to support him through medical school, of course, but he insisted on being independent. The implication was clear. Oliver could have lived comfortably on family money, but instead he'd struggled because he'd chosen to be with me. After dinner, Constance pulled Oliver aside. I could hear them talking in the hallway. She's very different from what we expected. I love her, Mother. Love is wonderful, darling. But you need to consider the long-term implications. Different backgrounds can create friction. Natalie is kind, intelligent, and hardworking. I'm sure she is. But can she navigate our world? Can she represent this family properly? I'd pretended not to hear, but every word had landed like a blow. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of family gatherings where I never quite fit. Where my clothes were never quite right. Where my conversation never quite measured up. 3 years of Constance's subtle digs disguised as concern. That dress is lovely, dear. Very department store chic. You don't golf? How unusual. I suppose it's not everyone's sport. Oh, you're working Christmas week? How dedicated. Though most families in our circle expect wives to prioritize family gatherings over employment. Oliver always told me I was imagining things. That his mother was just formal, that she'd warm up eventually. But she never did. If anything, she got worse after Oliver and I bought a house in a normal neighborhood instead of accepting her offer to buy us a place in the right area. You're lowering my son's standard of living, she'd said when we showed her our modest 3-bedroom home. Theodore and Vivian treated me with polite condescension. Always explaining how things are done in their world. Always making me feel like a child who didn't understand the rules. Frederick was mostly quiet. Occasionally, he'd give me a sympathetic look, but he never contradicted Constance. And Oliver, who I loved with all my heart, tried to keep the peace. He'd defend me sometimes, but never forcefully enough to make a real difference. Every Christmas was the same. I'd dress carefully, arrive on time, endure hours of subtle criticism, and leave feeling smaller than when I'd arrived. This year, I'd promised myself would be different. Oliver had sworn he'd stand up to his mother if she made any cruel comments. That he wouldn't let this Christmas be like all the others. I'd believed him because I wanted to. But as I got ready that afternoon, putting on my best dress and doing my makeup carefully, I'd known deep down that nothing would change. The Ashfords would never accept me. And tonight, showing up 45 minutes late and covered in grease, I'd just confirmed everything they'd always believed about me. That I didn't belong in their world. That I never would. I'd left the house at 5 that evening, giving myself plenty of time to arrive before dinner at 6:30. Oliver had to finish an emergency surgery and would come later. He'd kiss me goodbye at the door and promised again that this year would be different. If Mother says anything cruel, I'll shut it down immediately, he'd said. I'd nodded and smiled, but I didn't believe him. 3 years had taught me that Oliver's promises to stand up to his mother rarely translated into action. Still, I'd driven toward the estate trying to stay optimistic. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe Constance would be in a good mood. Maybe Christmas spirit would soften her edges. Then I saw the car on the shoulder of the highway. It was already dark, snow starting to fall. The car's hazard lights blinked weakly. I could see someone sitting in the driver's seat. My first instinct was to keep driving. I was already running close on time. I was wearing my best dress, burgundy silk that I'd saved for 2 months to buy. My hair was styled. My makeup was perfect. Stopping would make me late. Constance would comment on my tardiness. She always did. But I couldn't drive past. Some instinct deeper than social anxiety made me pull over. The same instinct that made me become a nurse. The inability to see someone in distress and do nothing. I got out of my car, the cold hitting me immediately. Walked to the stranded vehicle and tapped on the window. The woman inside looked up, and I saw relief flood her face. She was probably in her early 60s. Well-dressed in an expensive-looking coat. Silver hair styled elegantly. She looked like she belonged at the same gathering I was headed to. She rolled down the window. Thank goodness. I've been sitting here for almost 30 minutes. No one stopped. What happened? The car just died. I was driving and everything shut off. I managed to coast to the shoulder, but now it won't start at all. Did you call for a tow? They said it would be hours. Christmas Eve, you know. Everyone's busy. I looked at my watch. 6:15. I had 15 minutes to get to the estate, and I was still 20 minutes away. Pop your hood, I said. Let me take a look. You know about cars? My dad's a mechanic. He taught me the basics. The woman got out, and we both went to the front of the car. She was tall, elegant, even in distress. Something about her bearing reminded me of Constance, though her face was much warmer. I opened the hood and looked at the engine. The woman held her phone up for light. I'm Beatrice, by the way. Natalie. I checked the obvious things first. Oil level was fine. No visible leaks. Then I tested the battery terminals. Here's your problem. Battery terminals are completely corroded. They're not making a connection. Can you fix it? Maybe. I have some tools in my car. I went back to my trunk and grabbed my emergency kit, something my dad had insisted I keep. Wire brush, wrench, baking soda, and water mixture for cleaning corrosion. For the next 20 minutes, I worked on the battery terminals in the freezing cold. My dress got streaked with grease. My hands turned black. Snow fell on my carefully styled hair, making it frizz and fall. Beatrice watched, holding the phone light steady. I'm so sorry, she said. You're ruining your outfit. It's fine. I'd rather get you back on the road safely. Where were you headed? You're dressed for something important. Family gathering. My husband's family. Christmas Eve dinner. You're going to be late. Yeah. I scraped out a particularly stubborn piece of corrosion. They're not going to be happy about that. Surely they'll understand when you explain. I laughed without humor. You'd think so. They're not kind people? I paused, then decided honesty was easier than pretending. My mother-in-law has never approved of me. Wrong background. My dad works in a factory. My mom works in a school cafeteria. I'm not from their world. Beatrice was quiet for a moment. That must be difficult. I'm used to it. 3 years of being tolerated but not accepted. I finished cleaning the terminals and reattached the cables. Try starting it now. She got in and turned the key. The engine caught immediately. Relief washed over her face. You did it. Thank you so much. I cleaned my hands as best I could with wet wipes from my car, but the grease was ground in. My dress was streaked with dirt and oil. My hair was a mess. I looked at my watch. 6:45. I was already 15 minutes late. Where are you headed? I asked. Beatrice's expression changed. Became more guarded. Actually, what's the address of your family gathering? I told her. Watched her face go very still. The Ashford estate? Yes. Do you know them? I do. Very well, actually. She paused. I'm headed there too. You're a friend of the family? You could say that. It's complicated. She looked at me carefully. What's your name again? Natalie Morrison. Well, Natalie Patterson before I got married. And your husband is Oliver? I was surprised. You know Oliver? I've never met him. But I know of him. I'm his aunt. His mother's sister. I stared at her. Constance has a sister? She hasn't mentioned me? Never. In 3 years, she's never mentioned having a sister. Beatrice's smile was sad. That doesn't surprise me. We haven't spoken in 26 years. She cut me off when I married someone she disapproved of. Someone she disapproved of? A middle school teacher. Not wealthy. Not from the right background. Sound familiar? Understanding washed over me. She did to you what she's been doing to me. Exactly. Except she took it further with me. Told me I was embarrassing the family. Cut off all contact. I've tried to reconnect over the years, but she's ignored every attempt. So why are you going there tonight? Because I'm tired of letting her control whether I can see my family. I have nephews I've never met. A brother-in-law I haven't seen in decades. Tonight, I decided to stop asking permission and just show up. She looked at me, at my ruined dress and greasy hands. Thank you for stopping, Natalie. Most people in Constance's world would have driven past. Too concerned about being late, about appearances. You stopped anyway. Anyone would have. No, they wouldn't have. Trust me. We stood there on the side of the highway, snow falling, and I realized this woman understood exactly what my life had been like for 3 years. We should go, I said finally. We're both late now. Yes. but at least we're late together. I followed her car the rest of the way to the estate, my heart pounding, knowing I was about to walk into that house looking like I'd been rolling in a ditch. Knowing Constance would use this as proof that I didn't belong. But also knowing that somehow, the woman I'd stopped to help was about to change everything. I just didn't know how yet. After Beatrice announced she was Constance's sister, the room seemed to freeze. Constance's face cycled through emotions so quickly I could barely track them. Shock, fury, fear, and something else, maybe shame. Frederick stood up slowly, his face pale. Beatrice, is it really you? Hello, Frederick. Beatrice's voice was warm. You're looking well. Distinguished. It's been, how long? 26 years. Since the week I married James. Theodore looked between his parents and this stranger with complete bewilderment. Someone want to explain what's happening? Who is this woman? Constance found her voice, though it shook. This is Beatrice. My older sister. Who hasn't been part of this family for over 2 decades and has no right to show up here uninvited. I invited myself, Beatrice said calmly. After 2 years of letters and phone calls you ignored, I decided to stop waiting for permission. Oliver had arrived during the confusion. He stood near me now, looking between his mother and his newly discovered aunt with shock. You have a sister? Why have you never mentioned a sister? Because she's dead to me, Constance said coldly. She made her choice 26 years ago. What choice? Theodore asked. Beatrice smiled sadly. I married someone your mother didn't approve of. A man named James Peterson. He was a middle school English teacher. A teacher, Constance spat the word. With no family money, no connections, no prospects. You were engaged to Richard Ashworth, do you remember? The merger between our families would have been. I didn't love Richard, Beatrice interrupted. I loved James. So I broke the engagement and married him instead. Frederick sat down heavily. Your mother was furious. The whole family was. They'd been planning that union for years. And you, Beatrice looked at Constance, were the most furious of all. You told me I was throwing my life away. That I was choosing poverty over dignity. That I was embarrassing the family name. You were. Constance's composure was cracking completely. You had everything. Position, wealth, a future. And you threw it away for a schoolteacher. I had a loveless arrangement and a future of maintaining appearances. I chose a life with someone I actually loved. Someone who valued me for who I was, not what family I came from. Vivian spoke up, her voice uncertain. And your family just cut you off? For marrying the wrong person. Completely. No contact. No financial support. Mother rewrote her will to leave everything to Constance. Father refused to speak to me. And Connie, Beatrice's voice softened, you were the cruelest of all. You told me I'd made my bed and would have to lie in it. That I wasn't welcome at family gatherings, holidays, anything. You erased me. Constance's hands were shaking. You chose him over us. I chose love over money. And I'd make the same choice again. Then why are you here? Constance demanded. Why now, after all these years? Because James died 2 years ago. Cancer. And sitting alone in our house, going through his things, I realized how much time I'd lost with my family. How many years I'd let you control whether I could see my own nephews. She looked at Oliver and Theodore. I have 2 nephews I've never met. I missed your childhoods, your graduations, your weddings. I let Constance's anger keep me away. But I'm done with that. Theodore was staring at Beatrice like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. You really chose a teacher over all of this? He gestured to the opulent room. I chose a man who loved me unconditionally over a life of pretending to be happy. Yes. And were you happy? Vivian asked quietly. Beatrice's face softened. Incredibly. James and I had 43 years together. We taught at the same community college. Raised 2 wonderful children. Had a small house and a garden and Sunday dinners with friends who cared about us. We didn't have money, but we had everything that mattered. Constance made a strangled sound. How lovely for you. It was, actually. I'm sorry you can't see that. Beatrice turned to Frederick. I've tried to reach out to you separately. Letters to your office. You never responded. Frederick looked ashamed. Constance, She made it clear that acknowledging you meant choosing between you and her. I didn't have the courage to defy her. But you do now? Constance turned on her husband with fury. She's your sister, Constance. And it's Christmas Eve. Yes, I have the courage now. This was unprecedented. In 3 years, I'd never seen Frederick contradict Constance. Never seen him stand up to her about anything. Oliver stepped forward. I'd like to know my aunt. If she's willing. Me too, Theodore added, though he looked uncertain. Constance looked between her husband and sons, panic replacing anger. You can't be serious. She abandoned this family. No, Connie. Beatrice's voice was firm but not unkind. You abandoned me. I tried to maintain contact. You refused. You made it impossible. Because you betrayed everything we stood for. I betrayed your values, maybe. But not my own. The room fell silent. Everyone looked uncomfortable except Beatrice, who stood calm and dignified despite having just walked into a house where she hadn't been welcome for 26 years. Finally, she turned to me. Natalie, I haven't properly thanked you. You stopped on that highway, ruined your dress, made yourself late, all to help a stranger. That's more grace than most people in this room have shown in years. Constance's face flushed red. How dare you? I dare because it's true. Look at her. Beatrice gestured to me. She's standing there covered in grease and dirt because she helped someone in need. And your first instinct was to send her home. To tell her she wasn't presentable enough for your gathering. She was late and disheveled. She was kind. Something this family seems to have forgotten the value of. Frederick stood up again. Beatrice is right. Natalie, I apologize. You should never have been made to feel unwelcome. Constance looked at her husband like he'd betrayed her. Frederick. Enough, Constance. His voice was firm. Beatrice is staying for dinner. And Natalie is staying too, exactly as she is. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. The words hung in the air. Constance stood frozen, clearly torn between maintaining her authority and risking a public confrontation she might lose. Theodore looked between his parents, something shifting in his expression. Oliver put his arm around me, finally, publicly choosing my side. And Beatrice smiled at me with such warmth and understanding that I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, I mouthed to her. She nodded. Thank you for stopping. In that moment, covered in grease and dirt, standing in a mansion where I'd never felt welcome, I finally felt like maybe I belonged. Not because I'd changed to fit their world, but because someone from their world had finally recognized my worth. Constance stood rigid for a long moment, her face pale with fury. Then she turned sharply and walked out of the room without a word. We all heard her heels clicking down the marble hallway, heard a door slam somewhere in the distant part of the house. Frederick let out a breath I didn't know he'd been holding. Well, he said quietly. That went about as expected. I'm sorry, Beatrice said. I didn't come here to cause a scene. Yes, you did, Frederick replied, but he was almost smiling. And it was about time someone did. Dinner was announced, the staff had been holding it, waiting for the family drama to resolve. We moved to the dining room, an awkward, uncertain group. The table was set for 12. Constance's place remained conspicuously empty. I started to sit in my usual seat near the end of the table, but Frederick gestured to the chair beside him. Natalie, please. Sit here. It was Constance's seat. The matriarch's position. I couldn't. Please, he said again, and something in his voice made me sit. Beatrice sat across from me. Oliver took the seat beside me, squeezing my hand under the table. Theodore and Vivian sat further down, both looking deeply uncomfortable. The staff served the first course, some kind of soup I couldn't identify. Usually Constance would explain each dish with comments about the chef's training or the ingredients' provenance. Tonight, there was just silence. Finally, Theodore spoke. So, Aunt Beatrice, tell us about your life. Your family. Beatrice smiled. I taught literature at Riverside Community College for 35 years. James taught English at the middle school. We have 2 children, your cousins. Daniel is 38, a social worker. Marie is 35, a veterinarian. Social worker and veterinarian, Vivian murmured. How noble. The comment hung in the air. Beatrice's expression didn't change, but I saw something flash in her eyes. They chose professions where they could help people, she said mildly. James and I taught them that success isn't measured by income but by impact. Theodore looked thoughtful. Did you ever regret it? Giving up all this? He gestured to the opulent dining room. Never. Not once. Not even when money was tight? When you saw what you could have had? Theodore, I had everything that mattered. A partner who loved me. Children who grew into good people. Work that fulfilled me. A life with purpose. She paused. What exactly did I give up? Dinner parties with people who valued me for my bank account? A loveless marriage to a man I didn't respect? This house with its empty rooms and emptier relationships? The words were gentle but devastating. Frederick was nodding slowly. Vivian looked stricken. Oliver was staring at his aunt like she'd revealed some profound truth. I spoke up before I could stop myself. Your husband. James. What was he like? Beatrice's whole face softened. He was kind. Genuinely, deeply kind. He saw the best in everyone. He loved teaching those middle school kids that other people thought were too difficult or too poor to invest in. He'd stay late helping students who struggled. He'd buy supplies with his own money when the school couldn't afford them. He sounds wonderful, I said quietly. He was. When he got sick, the school held fundraisers to help with medical bills. Former students came from across the country to visit him. The day of his funeral, over 300 people came. 300 lives he'd touched. She looked around the table. Tell me, when was the last time any of you touched a life? Actually made a difference in someone's world? Theodore opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer. I help people every day, I said, surprising myself. In the ICU. Saving lives is literally my job. Beatrice smiled at me. Yes, you do. And tonight you proved it again by helping a stranger on the highway. She looked at the others. While everyone here was inside, comfortable and warm, judging whether Natalie's dress was expensive enough and whether she arrived on time. That's not fair, Vivian protested. We didn't know. You didn't need to know. That's the point. Natalie helped because it was the right thing to do. Not because she knew who I was or what it might gain her. Oliver squeezed my hand again. When I looked at him, his eyes were wet. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't see it before. How they've treated you. How I let them treat you. See what? That you have more integrity than anyone in this room. Including me. Frederick cleared his throat. Oliver's right. Natalie, I owe you an apology as well. I've stood by while Constance made you feel unwelcome. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really I was just taking the easy path. Why now? I asked. Why are you speaking up now? Because Beatrice is right. It's past time. And because watching you stand there tonight, covered in dirt from helping a stranger, while Constance tried to send you away, I was ashamed. Ashamed of my wife, my family, and myself. Theodore was quiet, staring at his untouched soup. Finally, he looked up at me. I've been awful to you, haven't I? I didn't know what to say. He had been. They all had. But admitting it now felt dangerous, like it might close some door that was finally opening. You've been condescending, I said carefully. I thought I was helping, teaching you how to navigate our world. He laughed bitterly. But you didn't need to learn to navigate our world. We needed to learn from yours. Vivian touched his arm. Theodore. No, it's true. Look at us. Look at what we value. Appearance. Status. Wealth. And look at what Natalie values. Helping people. Kindness. Actually making a difference. He looked at Beatrice. Like you did. Like your husband did. It's not too late, Beatrice said gently. You can choose differently. Can we? Theodore's voice was almost pleading. We've been raised in this world. It's all we know. I was raised in this world too. And I left. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. The dining room doors opened. Constance stood there, her face carefully composed again, her eyes red but her posture perfect. I see you've all gotten quite comfortable in my absence, she said coldly. Frederick stood. Constance. Please join us. Join you? So I can listen to my estranged sister poison my family against me? I'm not poisoning anyone, Beatrice said calmly. I'm just telling the truth. Your truth. Your version of events. Do you have a different version? One where you didn't cut me off completely for marrying someone you deemed beneath us. Constance's jaw clenched. You made your choice. Yes. And you made yours. You chose money and status over your own sister. How did that work out for you, Connie? Are you happy? Is this perfect life everything you hoped it would be? The question hung in the air. Everyone waited for Constance's answer. She looked around the room. At her husband who'd finally stood up to her. At her sons who were looking at her with new, questioning eyes. At Beatrice, who'd built a happy life without the Ashford wealth. And at me, the daughter-in-law she'd tried so hard to reject. You don't understand, she said finally, her voice cracking slightly. You don't know what it's like to maintain this. To uphold standards. To preserve what our parents built. I know exactly what it's like, Beatrice said softly. I was raised in the same house you were. With the same expectations. The same pressure. The difference is, I decided those expectations weren't worth the cost. And look what you have to show for it. A teacher's pension and a small house. And 43 years of genuine love. Children who chose helping professions. A husband who died knowing he'd made the world better. Yes, Connie. Look what I have to show for it. Constance stood frozen, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. Constance didn't sit down. She stood in the doorway, gripping the frame like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Frederick, she said, her voice tight. May I speak with you privately? No. His answer shocked everyone, including Constance. Whatever you need to say, you can say here. In front of our family. Our family? Constance pointed at Beatrice, is not family. Not anymore. She's my sister-in-law. Oliver and Theodore's aunt. She's absolutely family. You're choosing her over me? I'm choosing honesty over pretense. There's a difference. Constance's face flushed. I won't be spoken to this way in my own home. It's our home, Constance. Ours. And I'm asking you to sit down and have dinner with your sister. With your family. Like a normal person on Christmas Eve. For a moment, I thought she'd refuse. Thought she'd turn and leave, maybe lock herself in her room for the rest of the night. But something in Frederick's expression must have convinced her this was a line she couldn't cross without consequences. She walked stiffly to the table and sat in the seat furthest from Beatrice. Her face was a mask of cold politeness. Dinner continued in uncomfortable silence. The staff served course after course. No one seemed to have much appetite. Finally, Oliver spoke. Aunt Beatrice, you said you have children. Cousins we've never met. Yes. Daniel and Marie. They both wanted to come tonight, but I asked them to wait. I wasn't sure how this would go. I'd like to meet them, Oliver said. Theodore nodded. Me too. Constance's fork clattered against her plate. Absolutely not. Why not? Theodore challenged. They're our cousins. They're strangers from a life that has nothing to do with ours. They're family, Frederick said firmly. And they're welcome in this house. You don't make those decisions. Yes, Constance. I do. This is my house too. My family too. And I've been silent too long while you controlled everything and everyone. The transformation in Frederick was stunning. 3 years I'd known him as a quiet, passive man who deferred to his wife on everything. Now he was standing up to her with a strength I'd never imagined. Constance looked around the table, seeming to realize she was outnumbered. Fine, she said icily. Invite whomever you want. Turn this family into a circus. I'll have no part of it. She stood and left again, this time not slamming the door but closing it with controlled precision that was somehow worse. After she left, Beatrice sighed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruin your Christmas. You didn't ruin anything, Frederick said. You exposed what was already broken. We finished dinner in a strange atmosphere, still uncomfortable, but also oddly liberated. Like a weight had been lifted. After dessert, Beatrice asked to speak with me privately. We went to the library, away from the others. I want to thank you again, she said once we were alone. And I want to tell you something important. What? The way Constance treats you, it's not about you. It never was. It feels pretty personal. I know. But you represent something that terrifies her. You chose Oliver when he was a struggling medical student. Before the money from his practice. Before the prestige. You chose him for who he was, not what he could provide. So you made the same choice I made. Love over security. Partnership over status. And Constance can't forgive that because it highlights the choice she didn't make. I sat down in one of the leather chairs. She didn't marry for love? She married Frederick because he was from the right family. Good investment banking career. Would maintain the lifestyle she was accustomed to. And to her credit, they've built a stable life together. But no passion. No fire. No partnership. Frederick has never stood up to her because she chose him for his compliance as much as his pedigree. Until tonight. What changed? Seeing me, I think. Being reminded that there was another path. One she didn't take. Beatrice smiled sadly. When I married James, Constance was engaged to Richard Ashworth. He was from old money, perfect on paper. But he was also controlling and cold. She went through with that marriage anyway, lasted 5 years before he left her for someone younger. I didn't know she'd been married before Frederick. The family doesn't talk about it. Failure isn't acceptable in our world. After the divorce, she married Frederick within a year. Safe choice. Stable. Predictable. Does she love him? I think she appreciates him. Respects him. But love? Real, passionate, inconvenient love? I don't think Constance has ever let herself feel that. I thought about Oliver. About how I'd met him during his residency when he was exhausted and stressed and surviving on coffee and 4 hours of sleep. How I'd fallen for his kindness, his dedication, the way he talked to his patients. I'd never cared about his family money because I'd never known about it. So she resents me, I said slowly, because I have what she never let herself want. Exactly. You're a mirror showing her the life she could have had. And she can't stand it. What do I do with that information? Stop trying to win her approval. You'll never get it. Not because you're not good enough, but because accepting you means accepting that she made the wrong choices. The weight of that truth settled over me. Does it get easier? I asked. Living with family who resent you? Beatrice's smile was sad. I wouldn't know. I chose to leave. But you're trying to stay, to build a life with Oliver while navigating his family. That takes a different kind of courage. Some days I don't feel courageous. I feel exhausted. That's valid. But Natalie, you stopped tonight. On a freezing highway. Ruined your dress. Made yourself late. Why? Because someone needed help. Exactly. You lead with kindness. With service. That's who you are. Don't let Constance or anyone in this family make you feel like that's a weakness. It's your greatest strength. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Beatrice asked, "What will you do now? After tonight?" I don't know. Oliver says things will be different, but you've heard that before. Yes. He stood up for you tonight. In front of everyone. That's not nothing. No. It's not nothing. Give him a chance to prove he means it. But also, she leaned forward, don't be afraid to set boundaries. To protect yourself. You deserve a husband who defends you consistently, not just when his long-lost aunt shows up. You're wise. I'm old and I've made enough mistakes to learn from them. She smiled. James used to say that the measure of a person isn't where they come from but what they do with where they're going. You stopped tonight. You helped. You showed grace under pressure. That's worth more than any amount of Ashford money or breeding. When we returned to the main room, Frederick was talking with Oliver and Theodore. All 3 men looked different somehow, more present, more engaged. Vivian approached me hesitantly. Natalie, can we talk? We stepped aside. She looked uncomfortable. I want to apologize, she said. I've been terrible to you. Condescending and cruel. I told myself I was helping, but really I was just. I don't know. Protecting my own position, maybe. Position? I married into this family too. I'm from money, but not Ashford money. I've spent 5 years proving I belong here. And when you showed up, not even trying to fit in, just being yourself, it threatened me. I wasn't trying to threaten anyone. I know. That's what made it worse. You didn't care about the things I'd been killing myself to achieve. And part of me envied that freedom. It was the most honest conversation Vivian and I had ever had. Thank you for saying that, I told her. I'm going to do better. Actually be a sister to you instead of a critic. I'd like that. Oliver found me as the evening was winding down. Ready to go home? I nodded. More than ready. As we said our goodbyes, Beatrice hugged me tightly. You're stronger than you know. Don't forget that. Driving home, Oliver reached for my hand. Today changed everything, didn't it? Yes, I said. I think it did. 3 months after that Christmas Eve, I walked into the Ashford estate for Sunday dinner and felt something I'd never felt before in that house. Welcome. Constance greeted me at the door. Not warmly, she'd probably never be warm, but without the thinly veiled contempt that used to color every interaction. Natalie, you're on time. Traffic was light. She nodded and stepped aside to let me in. It was a small gesture, but 3 months ago she would have made me wait while she finished whatever she was doing. Progress came in increments. The biggest change was Frederick. He'd found his voice that Christmas and hadn't lost it since. The first Sunday after Christmas, Constance had made a comment about my outfit, something about department store fashion. Frederick had cut her off immediately. Constance, that's enough. Natalie looks lovely. She'd been so shocked she'd actually stopped mid-sentence. It had happened again 2 weeks later when Constance suggested Oliver and I should move to a better neighborhood. They're happy where they are, Frederick had said firmly. Leave it alone. Slowly, Constance had learned that her subtle cruelties would no longer go unchallenged. She still made the occasional comment, but Frederick shut them down before they could land. Theodore had changed even more dramatically. The Sunday after Christmas, he'd pulled me aside. I've been thinking about what Aunt Beatrice said. About making a difference instead of just making money. And I'm volunteering at a legal aid clinic. 1 evening a week. Helping people who can't afford attorneys. I'd been stunned. That's wonderful. It's humbling, actually. These people have real problems. And most of them are kind and hardworking and just unlucky. It's making me rethink a lot of things. Now, 3 months later, Theodore was at that clinic 3 evenings a week. He talked about his clients during family dinners, their struggles, their resilience. Vivian had started volunteering at an animal shelter. It was like Beatrice's arrival had cracked something open in all of them. Beatrice herself had become a regular presence. She came to Sunday dinners, brought her children Daniel and Marie. They were warm, funny, completely unpretentious. Marie and I had bonded immediately over our shared healthcare backgrounds. The family dynamic had shifted entirely. Conversations were more genuine, less performative. People actually listened to each other instead of waiting for their turn to name drop or discuss their latest acquisition. But the most important change was in Oliver. 2 weeks after Christmas, he'd come home from the hospital and said, "We need to talk." I'd braced myself, not sure what was coming. "I've been a terrible husband," he'd said. Not in the obvious ways. "I love you, I'm faithful, I support your career. But I let my family treat you like garbage for 3 years. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but really I was just taking the easy path." Oliver. No, let me finish. "When I saw you standing there that night, covered in grease because you'd stopped to help a stranger, and my mother tried to send you home like you were an embarrassment, I was ashamed. Not of you. Of myself. Of my family. Of every time I let them make you feel less than. You defended me that night. After 3 years of not defending you. That's not good enough." He'd taken my hands. "I'm going to do better. Really better. Not just when we have an audience, but every day. And if my mother ever makes you feel unwelcome again, we're leaving. No more excuses. No more keeping the peace. You're my wife. You come first." And he'd kept that promise. When Constance had made a snide comment about my common background during a dinner in January, Oliver had stood up immediately. "We're leaving. Natalie, get your coat." Constance had been shocked. "Oliver, I was only. You were being cruel. And we're not staying for it. When you're ready to treat my wife with respect, let us know." We'd left. Constance had called the next day with the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her. Perhaps I was overly critical. Now, 3 months later, the comments had mostly stopped. Either Constance was learning, or she'd decided maintaining a relationship with her son was more important than maintaining her sense of superiority. Dinner that evening was almost pleasant. Beatrice told stories about teaching. Daniel talked about a case he was working on, helping a family navigate the foster system. Marie described a surgery she'd performed on a rescue dog. The conversation was about purpose, impact, actual substance. Not about who'd been seen where or what charity gala was coming up. After dinner, Constance asked to speak with me privately. We went to her sitting room, a place I'd never been invited before. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair. I sat, wary. She was quiet for a moment, looking at her hands. "I owe you an apology." I almost fell out of the chair. "I'm sorry. For the last 3 years. For making you feel unwelcome. For judging you based on your background instead of your character." "What changed?" "Beatrice." She smiled bitterly. Seeing my sister after 26 years. Hearing about the life she built. The happiness she found. It made me realize what I've been protecting all these years isn't worth protecting. "What do you mean?" "I've spent my life maintaining appearances. Upholding standards. Ensuring everyone knew the Ashford family was above reproach. And for what? My sister is happier than I've ever been. My husband finally found his spine, and I realized I respect him more now than I did when he was compliant. My sons are finding purpose beyond their bank accounts." She looked at me directly. "And you? You represent everything I was taught to disdain. Working-class parents. State school education. A helping profession instead of something prestigious. But you're also kind, capable, and genuinely in love with my son. Not his money. Not his name. Him. I do love him. I know. I've always known. That's why I resented you so much. I don't understand. Because you made the choice I didn't. You chose love over security. Partnership over status. And you did it without fear or hesitation. While I spent my entire life calculating the safe path. It was the most honest Constance had ever been with me. "It's not too late," I said quietly. "To choose differently now. Isn't it? I'm 58 years old. Set in my ways." Beatrice was 60 when she showed up on Christmas Eve and changed everything. "Age is just an excuse." She almost smiled. "You sound like my sister." "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should." She stood, signaling the conversation was ending. "I can't promise I'll change overnight. Old habits are difficult to break. But I'm trying. And I want you to know that you're welcome here. Not tolerated. Welcome." "Thank you." As I left her sitting room, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, it was too soon for that. But possibility. The chance that maybe, eventually, we could build something real. A year after that Christmas Eve, Oliver and I hosted dinner at our house. Our modest 3-bedroom in the normal neighborhood Constance used to criticize. Everyone came. Frederick and Constance. Theodore and Vivian. Beatrice and her children. Even some cousins I'd never met before Beatrice reconnected the family. The house was full and loud and joyful. People crammed around our dining table. Daniel helped me in the kitchen. Marie played with the neighbor's dog in our backyard. Theodore and Oliver argued good-naturedly about sports. Constance sat in our living room, looking around at the simple furniture and modest decor. She didn't comment on any of it. Just accepted a glass of wine from Frederick and watched her family laugh and talk and genuinely enjoy each other. Later, as people were leaving, Beatrice pulled me aside. "You did this, you know." "Did what?" "Brought this family back to life. Reminded us what actually matters." "I just stopped to help someone on the highway." "You did more than that. You showed us grace when we didn't deserve it. Kindness when we showed you contempt. You didn't change to fit our world. You stayed yourself. And eventually, we had to change to deserve you." I hugged her. "Thank you. For showing up that night. For being honest. For everything. Thank you for stopping." As everyone drove away, Oliver and I stood in our doorway, waving goodbye. "Happy?" he asked. "Very. Even with my complicated family? They're less complicated now. More real." He kissed my forehead. "I love you. And I'm sorry it took me so long to show my family they had to respect you. You're showing them now. That's what matters." We went inside and started cleaning up. Our small house with its modest furniture and department store dishes. The life we'd built based on love instead of money. And I realized Beatrice had been right all along. This partnership, purpose, genuine connection was worth more than any Ashford estate or family legacy. I'd stopped on a highway on Christmas Eve to help a stranger. And in doing so, I'd helped save a family from itself. Not by changing who I was, but by refusing to become someone I wasn't. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give people is showing them there's another way to live, another set of values to embrace, another definition of success. I'd arrived at that Christmas gathering covered in grease and dirt, expecting judgment. Instead, I'd sparked a revolution. And now, a year later, I stood in my own home surrounded by people who finally understood that integrity, kindness, and love mattered more than pedigree or wealth. Constance would probably never be warm. Frederick would probably always be a bit formal. Theodore and Vivian were still learning. But they were trying. And that was enough. Because family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. About choosing each other even when it's hard. About growing and changing and admitting when you're wrong. I'd learned that by helping Beatrice. And the Ashfords had learned it by watching me. Sometimes stopping to help a stranger changes more than just their day. Sometimes it changes everything.